Howdy campers and welcome to a very different video. This time we're going to be playing Genfinad, which is a game that just officially released about a week and a half ago that aims to replicate the Runescape classic feel and art style. This game is developed by Rose Tinted Games. This is their first and only game that they've produced so far, and as the name suggests, this is sort of a recreation of RuneScape Classic, mostly to play on some of that nostalgia of early MMORPGs along with specifically RuneScape Classic. Before we hop into it, I do want to mention that this game is free to play, and when I was first playing it, I didn't realize that this is more or less almost a demo of the game because it is pretty much just the quote free to play experience. Most skills don't have things going past level 20 or anything like that, but this is an official release, so there won't be any more wipes or resets like they've had in the past for their alpha versions that were Kickstarter exclusive. I'm sure you've also noticed by now that I'm playing this game in a web browser, and that's because there's no official client for it yet. There is an expectation that it'll be released on Steam eventually, maybe a month or two down the line, but nothing official has been said about that yet either. First thing that was up was character customization, and I realized even though there's male and female faces that you can choose from, there isn't a difference between male and female bodies. I'm assuming because they didn't want to have to make sprites for male and female armor, so that's very awkward, but okay. So after I finish customizing my character to try to be as close as I can to my old school RuneScape character, we talk to the overseer who tells me that I'm at the Cliché Adventure Boot Camp and that I shouldn't be worried if I have crippling amnesia because that's completely normal. Once I'm done talking with him, I go over to this table here that has a sword and shield on it and decide it's time to fight some rats after talking to this tutor here. And now I just want to take a second to show you guys the soundtrack because I was not a fan, especially not for this first area. Here, take a listen. I want to I actually hate this music. It's really pissing me off. I'm lowering it for myself, but keeping it the same for you guys. Combat is mind-numbingly simple. You just click on the enemy and wait for him or yourself to die, but what's more to expect from a free-to-play RuneScape experience? Next up, we head over to the butchery and cooking tutorial, where we learn about butchery, which is processing meat you get from animals, and cooking also includes an additional step using a prep table to make more advanced dishes. So we headed over to the chicken coop to grab ourselves some chicken carcasses, and we eventually found the butchery table to process the meat that the chicken had dropped and then cook it as well on the range. So in Genfinad, there's an additional step where after killing an animal, you have to butcher the carcass, then you can use the meat to cook on a range. And when you butcher the carcass, that's also when you get things like feathers, pelts, and other things like that. We went to go mine some tin and copper to try out mining and smithing, and it works the same exact way as in RuneScape. However, when I went over to the anvil in order to do the smithing part of it, I was instantly overwhelmed by the insane amount of things that you could craft. Rivets and components here and there, and I was very confused and thrown off by it because it all seemed incredibly not useful. Not in the terms of like gameplay, but just an unnecessary extra step that didn't need to be added. Like if a plate body takes 5 bars to make, why do I have to turn it into a plate and rivets and a chain and then turn that into a plate body? And then once I finished making this plate body, I realized that it's the ornamental plate body which you need later down the road for completing the tutorial, and you can't even wear it. Next up, we tried out botany, which is basically a simplified version of farming. So we grabbed ourselves some potatoes and then went to cook them so we'd have a little bit of food. And while cooking these potatoes, I found out that there's a quality system in GenFanad where basically you can have high quality, regular quality, or low quality ingredients, which, although it's an interesting system, it does make cooking a little bit more tedious because it'll only automatically cook one type at a time. So you have to cook all of your low quality, then you have to cook all your medium quality, and then all of your high quality in three separate actions. Then we went to pick up a slime key from one of these slimes to get out of this little tutorial dungeon, and we made our way up to the overworld. Once up top, I go to the lumberjack tutor to grab myself an axe. And while talking to her to ask her about whittling, I get prompted to ask her about a mannequin that the guard told me to make, which I haven't been asked to make yet because I haven't talked to the guard. After already accidentally having made one of the quest items, I decided to make the mannequin anyway, even though I don't know who this guard is or why he's asking me for these items. And it's simple enough, just a bunch of logs cut in a couple different ways, and then all assembled together to make the mannequin. We also got our first achievement too for cutting down a tree, which I'm a fan of because I'm a sucker for achievements. I finally talked to the guard that the lumberjack tutor was telling me about, and he tells me the 5 items that I need to collect to finish the tutorial. It oddly tells me that I have to bribe the guard with these items, but it's not really a bribe if he just has a list of items everyone has to gather to complete the tutorial, and I just go and get them for him. Next, I go to grab the silk from the spiders down in the dungeon, but realize quickly that they are way too strong for me, and when I back off to try to use range, I accidentally enter melee combat and get instantly clapped. I go to grab my stuff back, but when I do, I find out that you cannot pick up items or do anything for that matter while in combat, including eating, which means that these items are pretty much a lost cause and I'll have to grab everything all over again. This would be extremely annoying, but I did keep 3 items on death, including the 2 items for the tutorial quest, so it's really not that big of a setback. Now that I've acquired a crippling fear of those spiders, I decide to start working on some of the other items for the tutorial quest, starting out with the clay statue. And when I go to wet the clay with a bucket of water, it consumes the bucket, leaving me perplexed as to how that's even physically possible. Like, that's definitely defying one of the fundamental laws of conservation of matter, but then again, RuneScape characters can eat an entire shark and octopus in point 0.6 seconds, so I guess I shouldn't be talking. While I'm here, I also make myself a plate so that I can make the chicken and potato recipe since it needs a plate to be on. They also tell me that the item icon for this statuette is just a clay pot because I guess they didn't want to make a PNG for it, but that's confusing because all the other tutorial unique items like the mannequin and stuff have their own item icons. So I don't understand why they didn't make one for this one too. And now, with all the other items out of the way, I decide to spend about 30 minutes making myself some better gear in order to fight this spider, because I figured it'd also come in handy after the tutorial's over, too. This kind of just brings me back to my point that smithing is overly complicated in this game. I just don't think it's necessary to have all of these weird components in order to make the items when you could just make the item itself. It makes understanding the crafting recipes and actually making the items just such a drawn out and tedious process. And with all of my new gear in hand, we go to fight the spiders and absolutely destroy them super easily. And we get their silk so we can make the banner and finally complete the tutorial after about 2 hours or so, which is a long time for a tutorial, but I was also taking it slow and trying to actually look into all the different mechanics. So I don't think it's that bad, especially for a game that isn't holding your hand through every single step of the process, and you have to kind of figure out on your own what you're doing. After talking to the guard and feeling pretty good about going out into the world, he tells me that I have to return all of my items that I got from the tutorial, and I get kicked out naked onto the streets of the town called Scent. Although I was pretty upset about losing all of my gear, I pretty quickly find a shop that sells some basic gear to begin with, and we did get a 50 GP stipend from completing the tutorial, so we spend that on some gear to start us out. I explore around for a little bit, just looking at different shops into this town that I've been dropped down into, kill a couple slimes, and eventually make my way over to a farmer who says he's in need of a little bit of help. He tells me that the millers who normally come by to pick up his wheat haven't come by today, so I should go out looking for them because he needs someone to pick up his wheat. And pretty much the entire time that I was completing the tutorial, I was mostly looking forward to this, just randomly coming across quests and then trying to find where they're telling me to go and what person to talk to next. The farmer tells me to go to the east, so I instantly book it west after misreading my compass and quite quickly get distracted looking at some of these really fun sprites from the cows and both the chickens here. So I kill some chickens, cook their meat, and then use it to kill a couple slimes. But after exploring for a little bit longer, I decided to just log out for the night because the choppy art style and everything was actually kind of starting to give me a headache. But the next day, I'm back at it again, and I picked up a knife so I could fletch while walking around and exploring, and I also find a firelighter as well, so I can also make some fires and train my survival skill. And as I'm walking around and just exploring and enjoying the scenery, something pretty crazy happens. I really start enjoying the game for the first time because it is just so much fun to explore, talk to people, and see what there is to see. There are tons of different monsters, all of which look great with their sprites, and a ton of NPCs to talk to that all have weird, quirky dialogue. While I'm exploring, I also come across the yellow brick path, which feels like a really oddly out of place Wizard of Oz reference for this game, but we'll get back to that. And we eventually come across Brick Roads, who asks us for another quest. Brick Roads is the surveyor of the yellow brick path, and he says it's in bad disrepair. So he asks us to forge an official government document so that he can get more bricks for the yellow brick path. We, of course, say that we'll help him out, but he does require us to have a hammer in order to pound out some logs into paper, which we don't have, so I'll have to come back to this one later as well. I traveled my way past Scent again and found this guy who must be a big fan of Raids 1, and he told me he needed me to deliver a chicken and potato dish to his mother because his mother wasn't speaking to him for stealing her food. But there were a bunch of scary looking enemies in there, and I was still level 3, so off to somewhere else. Yet another quest that we've started that we're not going to do. We started walking south and we ran across the town of Miller, where we actually found the place where the farmer was asking us to go to get his wheat processed. The man there tells me to talk to his wife because she's the one who deals with his business, and the wife tells us that her crab amulet is missing. We go back to talk to her husband, and he says that the gourmet is always stealing it. So, as opposed to stealing it back from the gourmet, just go make her a new one. I was surprised to then find the gourmet chilling there, literally 20 feet away in a different house. After talking to him briefly, he then tells me that he's got his own quest for me where he needs me to help him make a devilish recipe. I needed to find 3 different items for him from 3 different people, and not exactly sure where to go, I just kept heading down south because one of the people was a farmer, and I know the town of Plenty has a bunch of farmers in it, so I thought he might be there. When I get to Plenty, I actually talk to the guard that's right by the entrance, and he tells me that he's also got a quest for me. His quest is that he is sitting here on guard duty when it is the anniversary of his mother's passing. So he can't leave his post, but he wants us to go put some primrose flowers on her grave. When we were just in the town north, we actually found these primroses that we need to pick, and I even inspected them and saw that it takes level 5 botany to pick them. So we were level 3, and I figured we could just get level 5 real quick and finish our first quest. I started picking some potatoes, and in the upper left hand corner by your portrait, you'll get XP drops. And I was seeing I was getting 9 XP per potato. And I'm like, oh, wow, that's really low, but that's fine. I'll still be level 5 in no time. Then what I realized was unironically so baffling that it made me completely reconsider how I thought about this game. On the profile there, when it's showing the XP drops, it doesn't show 9 XP. It shows zero point 0.9 XP. Each potato you gather was giving me zero point 0.9 XP. And on top of that, Genfinad's XP curve is even harsher than old school RuneScapes, meaning that I would have to gather hundreds upon hundreds of potatoes just to hit level 5. This was already frustrating enough, but as I'm editing this video, I realized that the day before I was picking potatoes and getting 2.2 XP. Why did they change the XP given and there was not a single announcement about it? I've looked all over their webpage. Every day I was checking it because I was so engrossed with this game, and not a single announcement about slashing the XP rates of botany by 60%. I was just absolutely baffled when I realized that because this game is such an insane grind fest. And that's coming from someone who spent 200 hours cooking in order to hit 200 million cooking XP on old school RuneScape. A couple days later, they released a patch where they did increase the XP rates for botany. And so now potatoes are 1.4 XP, and I'm sure other things are a little bit more as well. But that's still significantly lower than what they were on the first day that I played. And this seems like it's an ongoing trend with the developers where they're metagaming against the player base. They recently halved the XP you get from iron ore because apparently they thought it was too good in a game that's already so grindy. And the only people that are seriously playing it are people that Kickstarter backed it at the beginning, so they're already super engaged and love the game, which is great. But for anyone like myself that's trying to get into the game now, it's just honestly horrible. I really do enjoy this game in a lot of ways, and the questing is still pretty fun, so I decided to go back to that and started enjoying myself quite a bit more. I went back to Brick Roads with a hammer so I could make the paper, and once I made the paper and the ink, he told me that I needed to steal a copy of someone else's document so I could make a copy of it. After I brought him back this document and made a copy and signed it, I then took it over to the Queen in order to get the bricks delivered, and while I was there, I ran across Dorothy, who asked me to make her some steel-toed emerald slippers so that she could kick the teeth in of the Wicked Witch of the West. That's right, the Yellow Brick Road isn't just a reference to the Wizard of Oz. Pretty much the largest quest in the game that I can tell is just the Wizard of Oz. And there's even the entire Emerald City in the game as well, but I'm assuming you have to complete this quest in order to unlock it, and in order to make steel gear, I'm assuming you have to have at least 20, 25 smithing or something like that, which is incredibly high to get with all of the stuff currently in the game. But honestly, this quest sounds so insane and fun that I'm seriously considering doing it because I want to see how this quest ends. But back on track, after talking to the Queen, she tells us that she'll get some new bricks over to Brick Roads real quick. But she says currently the yellow brick road is a bit too drab, so she's going to send colorful bricks over so it'll look a lot different and nicer. I go back to Brick Roads, who's confused by the decision, but still happy that we helped him out, and gives us our reward. Our reward consists of several thousand XP and 3 different skills, which is honestly incredible and way better than actually grinding out XP. So it gives me a really nice XP dopamine rush, and I think that's what pretty much sums up this game perfectly for me, is that the questing is a lot of fun, the world created is incredible, and the grinding is not. The next day, I even hit level 5 botany off of passively getting XP while training on some slimes. So I went back to Miller to pick one of the primroses, and the guy there told me I could take one if I repaired his fence. So after using a hammer on the fence and just telling him I repaired it, even though it stayed broken, he let me pick some of his flowers, and I went back to put it on the guard's mother's grave. The ghost of the mother appeared to me and told me that basically her sons are both idiots, especially since they could never remember what day she died on or were too busy to be there. But she thanked me and left, and then I returned to the guard to get those juicy quest XP rewards. I also then gathered all of the items that I needed to finish the infernal recipe, took them back to the gourmet, who then, after a very concerningly evil speech about summoning a demon, made some popcorn. Honestly, this was a really fun quest to read through. The dialogue is great, and pretty much the entire time he was doing his evil speech, I'm like, everyone else said he's a fine guy, so I'm assuming this isn't anything actually evil, but I was actually concerned for a second there. Also, this quest unlocks the ability to cook popcorn, which just takes 2 corn and heals you 3 HP twice. So it's actually an extremely good food source. And afterwards, I used it to train on slimes, and it made the training significantly easier. And now, especially for combat, since I have gotten into sort of a flow state for it, it's honestly kind of fun. I enjoy just the cycle of collecting corn, cooking it into popcorn, killing enemies, picking up their drops, processing the drops, selling the drops, and then doing it all again. It's honestly that same sort of thing that I like with RuneScape, where it allows you to just get into this sort of pattern where you can just relax and grind. So overall, I think I've made my thoughts on the game pretty clear at this point, but it's a really fun game for the quests, and it's also free. So if you enjoy RuneScape, if you enjoy MMOs and questing, I would recommend at least trying it out. I'll definitely be keeping up with the updates because they are planning on doing weekly updates for the foreseeable future and adding a ton of new content. But outside of questing and leveling up skills for questing, I really don't see myself playing this game a whole heck of a lot. Obviously, this was a pretty different type of video for me to make, but I did enjoy it, and I just wanted to shout out a YouTube channel I watch called Josh Strife Hayes, who has a series called Worst MMO Ever, where he just plays through a bunch of different MMOs and gives his opinions on them. And I kind of took his overall style and formatting for this one. But I am curious to hear what you guys thought about this game, if you've played it, if you've seen other people play it. I know Sick Nerd and even today It's Will was streaming it, so it's gotten a bit of publicity in the last week. But other than that, that's going to do it for this one, and I will be back to uploading RuneScape content next week. So until next time, happy camping.